Well, happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Happy Valentine's Day.
And oh, great. We see Colin has joined us. Welcome to another session in the last day of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. I'm Bob Ailes. I'm still your moderator. We have with us Dr. Leanne Kaiser, who is an associate professor at Colorado State University in the School of Education. Excuse me. Leanne's main research includes distance education, including effective online facilitation of teaching practices and the various formats in which distance education is offered. And today she's going to talk about why and how to evaluate asynchronous online teaching. Yeah, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob. Hello, everybody. Um, Only if you are comfortable doing so, since we're a small enough group, I'd love to just hear, a sentence or two about kind of where you work or where your interest lies in this topic of evaluating asynchronous online teaching. So you're welcome to unmute or pop something in the chat. Let's just take a minute for that. That's going to help me to make sure that kind of my ideas and examples fit the group here. So would anybody like to go?
Hey, I'm happy to share.
Hi,
So,
Stephanie.
hi. So I'm at Penn State and I've got a few years of experience in working with online learning. And one of my passions over the years has been how to kind of determine, how we evaluate what's happening in those asynchronous online courses. It's so easy to see when you walk into a K-12 situation, for example, and you can, when I say see, I mean observe and watch and write things down. And it's just not that obvious in our online courses. So I've done a little investigating there, and I'm really interested in hearing more and learning from you. Thanks.
Great, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate hearing about that. Um, Thank you, Bambi. It looks like you work in an asynchronous online bachelor's of nursing program. So yeah, perfect. Carol, thank you. So we have an MHA program, both in person and asynchronous online. Good, excellent. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, folks. Again, that just helps me to, oh, and here we have Colin. Colin, you help to oversee hybrid programs, both at the master's and doctoral level, including asynchronous. That is so true. Faculty don't quite know how to think about these elements, assessment or otherwise. Yeah, very true. So, all right, folks. So I will jump into the presentation here. Please feel free at any time. It really doesn't bother me. We're a small group. If you want to interrupt, feel free to do that, whether you unmute or put something in the chat. I will try to pay attention to the chat, what's going on there. But yeah, we can, I'll go through this, but let me know if there's anything you want to talk about. Okay, so as Bob had mentioned, my name is Leanne Kaiser. I'm with Colorado State University. I teach in, we just renamed ourselves, so I have to get used to the new name. It's called Learning Design and Training. It's a specialization master's program. And I pretty much exclusively at this point in my life teach master's and doctoral level students. And I would say probably about 85% of my teaching is asynchronous online. I've done quite a bit of in-person teaching, but over the years, it's kind of morphed into the more of the asynchronous side of things. And in addition to doing a lot of teaching in that area, that is also the area that I do the vast majority of my research in various aspects of asynchronous online teaching, whether that's inclusive practices or best practices for student motivation asynchronously online, all sorts of things. Today, though, what we're going to look at is why and how to evaluate asynchronous online teaching. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So let's start with this is probably pretty basic, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So a real foundational piece of information about why we review teaching at all. And this is whether we're talking about reviewing graduate level learning or asynchronous online or in person, whatever it may be. So I would say probably, I think the most important reason that teaching needs to be reviewed is this first point here, is it just provides new viewpoints, perspectives, and ideas. As we're well aware, teaching can be a pretty insular situation where you have the instructor and you have the learners, and that's all. Nobody kind of comes within that that little circle, right? And of course, you can get feedback and you can get ideas from students and from your learners, but it's going to be different. There's always a power differential, right, between the instructor and the learners. And so what they're going to tell you as an instructor is just not going to be the same as if you bring somebody outside into your class. As well, students, generally may or may not be educators themselves, and so they may not know exactly what to look for, what sort of feedback to give you. So if you can kind of open up, right, that closed system, bring somebody in for those new perspectives and ideas, it's amazing kind of what it can open up. A couple of other reasons, more practical reasons for teaching reviews is things like, if somebody is going up for promotion or tenure, or if you have a performance review. An evaluation or a review of teaching is a really tangible thing that can be a part of those packets. And then finally, if somebody, if an instructor is changing something in their class, innovating something, it's a great idea to get feedback on how that's going. This one's top of my mind right now because I just decided, well, I've been thinking about this and working on it for a couple of years, but I finally pulled the plug this semester, and I am using an alternative grading process. So I'm not using points or letter grades or anything like that in my classes. And you can bet that I have somebody coming in and reviewing how that is going, because it is a big kind of scary change, and I absolutely want somebody to give me kind of feedback on this new innovation that I'm working on. Okay, so again, I don't think anything there is extraordinary or new to probably anybody, but I wanted to make sure that we at least have this baseline of, since everything we're going to talking about is reviewing teaching, of why we're even doing this. With that in mind, as was already mentioned in our introduction here, reviewing online teaching is really different, especially when that online teaching is happening asynchronously. So let's talk about a little of this. Reviewing asynchronous online teaching is very different from somebody coming into a face-to-face class or even a synchronous distance class. In those two settings, the person usually will come in and sit in the back of the classroom or log into Zoom like we're doing here, and they observe and they take notes and whatnot. They're actually there when things are happening, right? They show up, the instructor says, class meets on Wednesday at noon, show up. It's pretty obvious what that person is reviewing and observing. It's what is happening in front of them. It's what the instructor is saying. It's how the instructor is interacting with the students. It's the activities that are happening during that set time that the person is there observing the class. Asynchronous, clearly, does not happen that way. There's, a good possibility if you're teaching perhaps a semester-long course, or even a month-long course, that an observer can come in and see the entire class. Oh, that's a whole different animal, right? Like, how does somebody observe and review when they can see the entirety of a class in front of them, not just the hour that they were invited to sit in on? Another thing that makes reviewing online teaching, asynchronous online teaching, different is there needs to be a clear separation between reviewing the design of the course and the actual teaching practices of the course. You're going to hear me say this quite a bit. This is going to be an ongoing refrain today. In terms of course design, the person who's teaching the class may or may not have been the one to design that class. They may or may not have been the one to put together the modules and the different activities and choosing the assessments and whatnot. It's not altogether uncommon in asynchronous online teaching for a team of maybe instructional designers to create that, or a previous instructor even, and then that course gets passed on to later instructors. So if somebody is coming and doing a review of an asynchronous online class, reviewing the course design doesn't really make any sense if the person who is teaching the course wasn't the one to design it. But even if the current instructor of a class is the one who designed the content, the actual facilitation or teaching of the class requires a completely different set of skills than instructional design. So if you are saying, I want somebody to review my teaching, those two need to be separated, right? There's very, very different skill sets between those two. And then finally, like I had mentioned at the beginning of this slide, reviewing an entire online course can be overwhelming. There is just a lot of stuff there. How does somebody even approach that? So we'll, as we go on here this morning, we'll talk about how to address all of these various unique aspects of trying to review an asynchronous online course. Okay, so all of that being said, I just gave you a lot of problems and barriers that can be faced when trying to review asynchronous online. So let me try to kind of narrow this down. We're going to get into a lot more detail on this, but if this is like the one slide you take a picture of and take away from today, you're, I think, going to be in good shape. So if somebody is tasked or you ask somebody to review an online class, what should actually be reviewed? As I had mentioned, the focus really has to be on instructional interactions that are actual teaching practices, not design practices. So a couple of different ideas of where you can almost always find good teaching practices happening in any sort of announcements or updates or news that the instructor puts forward. Those are typically going to be things that an instructor is not going to recycle, right, from other years. There are things like, hey, I've noticed that the class is having an issue with this. Let's talk about that. Or here's something that's changing in the class. Those are real-time sort of things that are happening. A great way to look for instructional and teaching practices. Any sort of like what I'm going to call spontaneous lectures or mini lectures, also a great place to look for teaching practices. Now, these aren't maybe lectures that are recycled year to year, but an instructor might come in. For example, in my classes, I will often, if at the end of a week, or the end of a unit, I will do just a really short, maybe 3 or 4 minute lecture and summarize what the big ideas were, what the lingering questions are from the students and from the class. So those are actual on the ground teaching practices. Ooh, the facilitation, the discussion facilitation is also an excellent place to look at teaching practices. The instructor has to be in there interacting, directing. A great place to look at what an instructor is doing. You can also look at an instructor if they're engaged in any sort of group work areas and kind of helping folks in that. Grading and feedback is an excellent place also to see teaching practices. A reviewer may or may not actually have access to assignments or an assignment Dropbox, but if that's something that a reviewer has access to, excellent place to see how the instructor is interacting with students, providing them ongoing support on the things and the assessments that they're submitting, and then any other sort of interactions with students. Okay, so the bottom line here is that notice all of these things I just mentioned involve active participation by the instructor. In an online class, if the instructor isn't directly engaging with the students, the instructor is not there. I cannot emphasize that enough, right? You can have a class and everything's all set and you push go and you walk away and you let students see a pre-recorded lecture and take a quiz and go on. That quiz is automatically graded. That's not instructing. This instructor is not engaging with the students. There's nothing to really review in that case. In short, if you're trying to figure out what is an asynchronous online teaching practice, it's all the things an instructor says, writes, or does that aren't a part of the enduring course shell. So what I mean by that, these are all the things. If a course is in an LMS and then gets copied over and shared the next semester with another instructor, or maybe even the same instructor, all that stuff is the enduring course shell that moves on. Those aren't teaching practices, because those aren't the things that the instructor is in as the course is actually happening, saying, writing, or doing. Okay, so that is kind of our baseline of where we're coming from in terms of what's different with reviewing asynchronous online classes and what kind of the mindset is that needs to be taken when thinking about reviewing asynchronous online. All right, how do we do this? Let's really dig in now to the details. So I think that we can think about what these online teaching practices, right? That's those things that the instructor says, does, and adjusts in a class. We can put these in the 4 main categories. So we can look at teaching practices that are happening in terms of engagement, in terms of actual instruction, the assessments and the feedback, and also course administration. So let's go through each of the 4 of these and kind of look at the questions that a reviewer might ask to see, oh yeah, let's see if this instructor is effectively administering their course. Are they actually engaging students in the course? So starting with engagement, some questions to ask to see if an instructor is doing well in their engagement part of the teaching practices. Number 1, and I have this purposely as the first thing I'm noting at the very top of the page, because I would say it's probably almost one of the most imperative things that an asynchronous online instructor can do. Are their replies to students timely, right? So as the instructor, excuse me, is the instructor, getting back to students and timely, they can let the student know what that is, probably within like a day or so. Or is that student asking a question and they are just hung out, not knowing if the instructor is going to get back to them? They might have a question about how to do an assignment. They don't get back to them. I guess I'll just turn in the assignment, hope it goes well. Yeah, this is absolutely critical, and it saddens me when I do see online instructors just letting the students do their own thing and not being proactive in chatting and getting back to them on any sort of things that they need. The second piece of engagement to look for is the instructor frequently engaging in class? A couple of slides ago, we had a lot of different places you could look for an instructor engaging in class, right? Are they posting announcements? Are they putting these kind of spontaneous little mini lectures up? Are they a part of the discussions that are happening in class? There's a lot of ways for an instructor to do this. If they're not in there frequently engaging, even in an asynchronous online class, they're not teaching. The third thing is, does the instructor build relationships with students? There's a lot of different ways to do this. I'll just give one example that happened just last week with my students. So no secret, there's a lot of things happening with the federal government in the United States right now. And all of my students are educators in some respect, in some aspect. So there is a lot of concern, a lot of uncertainty about what all of these new federal actions are going to mean for their work and for their learners. I couldn't just ignore that. Also, it put me in a bit of a precarious position to say anything, right? This is a really fraught political time. But I also realized I couldn't just leave my students to be concerned and think that I wasn't listening or didn't care or didn't acknowledge that they were going through some difficulties. So I posted a short video just letting students know that I understood this was a difficult time. I kind of gave them some of the things that I don't flex on. And I posted that out there for them. This one video, it was amazing in terms of building relationships. I had at least half of my class directly message me, let me know kind of their situation related to what I said, kind of what their concerns were. So it was fantastic. And my intent again wasn't let's just build a relationship. I really needed to share with students what was going on and how I could support them. But it certainly did the double duty of building relationships with students. The last piece here under engagement is using inclusive practices, inclusive teaching practices. And that's everything from ensuring accessibility with materials to working with students, right, who might have differing issues in terms of whether it may be language barriers or technology sort of issues and things like that. So you'll hear this one come up again. Inclusive practices are a huge part for me of good online teaching. Okay, let's go to the second category then. Instruction, the next kind of big space that can be examined to review how somebody is teaching. The first thing to look at or to ask is, are a variety of instructional approaches being used? And this isn't just throwing everything out just to do it like, hey, let's make sure that every topic has a reading and a video and a website and a podcast. That's not what I'm talking about. The bigger idea is, are we thinking about instructional approaches that really are effective for whatever the topic is that needs to be learned? So for example, If the idea is the students really need to engage in critical thinking, you giving a lecture is not going to engage them in critical thinking, right? You might need to do, a discussion or a group project or something like that. So thinking about that variety. And then that matches with, or that aligns with the second question here, is are the actual approaches matching whatever the learning objective is? The third question to think about in terms of instruction is, does the instructor alter or use a new approach if their current one isn't working, right? So it's not just a matter of, yeah, this is what I said I'm going to do. I'm going to put my head down and do it. If students are not quite getting it, if they're struggling, if they're, doing poorly on assessments, does the instructor step back and say, okay, here's how I need to alter things, and then help students to understand these new approaches? Next, are instructional strategies active, interactive, applied, and student-centered? All great things to look for in instruction. That one applies whether you're teaching asynchronously online or in any other format. Are instructional strategies inclusive of diverse learners? I told you we'd come back to this one, also incredibly important. Is the student motivation considered during instruction? So again, does the instructor make the effort to kind of get to know who the learners are in their course, and then to kind of work the content and the instructional approaches in a way that is going to speak to those learners and make the most sense to them? And finally, important no matter where you are, but is the actual content knowledge of the instructor current and relevant? Pretty important. Okay, the third area then, for the big thing to look at for teaching practices is assessment and feedback. Again, I just want to put the caveat on this that a reviewer may or may not actually have access to assessments that are happening in class. It kind of depends on what sort of permissions an instructor is able to give or chooses to give to a reviewer. Where assessments are held. There might be ones that are kind of publicly available, right? It might be, a kind of a formative assessment happening in a discussion. That's going to be easy for a reviewer to see. Other ones are going to be like, hidden more in a Dropbox area, and the instructor would need to give permission to a reviewer. So just have that caveat in mind as we're kind of going through these things. So first question to ask about, are assessment expectations and grading criteria clear, and are they easy for students to find? That one should be obvious. That shouldn't be hidden behind any sort of Dropbox wall or anything like that. But critically important, a critically important teaching practice to have for students. They know what they're going to be graded on and how they're going to be graded. The second piece is does the instructor explain when and how feedback will be given? So the when, things like all assignments will be graded within 2 weeks of submission or whatever it may happen to be. And you will find feedback on a document uploaded with comments in the Dropbox, whatever it may be. Students really need to have a clear idea. And this is crucially important in an asynchronous online class as well, right? They can't jump up to you after class and be like, hey, did you have a chance to grade that exam yet? Or thanks. They need to know exactly what the expectations are when they can interact with you in real time. In terms of the actual feedback itself, incredibly important things to do to give good feedback is having the feedback directly related to stated expectations. Is it timely? Is the feedback specific, elaborative, individualized, relevant to a rubric, actionable? All of these things to look at. If you give an assessment and you plunk a grade of B+ on it and move away, that was a missed teaching and learning opportunity for both the instructor and the student. But doing all of these things really brings in excellent teaching practices. Is an appropriate feedback format used for the type of assessment? So what I mean by this is, for example, I have a class that I teach where the students all design a website. Me writing out feedback on a website is really complex, right? On the sub-tab under this, under this picture, there's an issue. That's just a mess. A better way to give that feedback, and what I do is I actually screen record me as I'm walking through the website so they can see it. I can point out what I'm talking about. So, or, if it's a written paper, probably you should put your feedback as a track change on the paper, different things like that. Next are the assignment Dropbox and gradebook, easy for students to understand and use. If they're not, you're going to have some troubles. The students are going to have some issues. And then finally, are students given the opportunity to ask questions and clarification on assessments? Again, they don't have that opportunity to walk up to you in the front of a room after class. So there needs to be some sort of capacity or mechanism in place for students to be able to say, I don't understand this. Can I help? Can you help me with this? And you need to let students pretty clearly know what that is and that you'll get back to them. I use a simple, I have small enough classes that this isn't overwhelming for me. I just let students know that you need to directly email me, put in the subject line, a question about paper XYZ. And I let them know that they also need to get those questions to me, not the night before something is due. I'm not in there checking my email at midnight before an assignment is due. So they have a pretty clear idea of how they can get a hold of me and the parameters that they need in order to get feedback from me or to have questions answered. Okay, last quick category, the actual administration of a course. If you just look at that term, you might think, isn't that kind of under instructional design? When I say course administration, I mean the things that the instructor individually puts into their course in order to make it run smoothly. So the first thing is just the information in the course current and up to date, which seems pretty basic, but oh my goodness, I have seen so many online courses where this isn't the case, right? Somebody forgot to go in and change the due dates on something. Little pro tip on that, the only place I ever put due dates in my online courses is actually in like the grade book, because then I know when I go back and use that course shell again, I only have to change them there, right? But if I'm putting due dates in different, modules or discussion areas and things like that, I am 100% going to miss updating some of those. So I only put it in one place. And I'm not just talking about due dates being up to date, but links to resources and websites and all that kind of good stuff. The second thing is there's no way in a course, no matter what modality you're teaching in, that there's not going to have to be some sort of updates and changes. And those just need to be communicated in a clear and timely manner to students so they know, right? So, hey, we are a little bit behind because folks were really struggling with this topic. So we're going to keep working on this for 3 more days. Don't move on to the new module yet, whatever it may be. If there are any issues or concerns or things that need to be clarified, they need to be promptly and fully addressed. Course policies need to be clearly communicated and effectively used. And both those have to go together. Huge thing, do students know when the instructor will and will not be available? On the very, very front page of my syllabus and in a welcome message that the students see the minute they log into my class, I let them know that even though the class is asynchronous and is available to the students at any time, I cannot be available every single day of the week and every hour of the week. So I let them know that I will respond to them within 24 hours, Monday to Friday. Friday late afternoon until Monday morning, they will not hear from me. I'm not going to respond to emails. I'm not going to be in class discussions. I need to have time off as well. That's just the way it needs to be. I've been doing this for, I don't know, probably at least 15 years now, and not a single time in all of those 15 years have I had a student question that or get upset about that, right? That I wasn't there to answer their question on Saturday afternoon or whatever it may be. They know when I'm available and they work around it. Second to the last question here, is information available for students to get help with technology or other areas not related to course content? I don't need to be the expert on these things. I am not the IT person, but I need to let students know where they can go to get help. And then finally, is the instructor able to effectively help students work through the course material in units, right? So, is everything organized in a way that makes logical sense to the students? Okay, so those are our big 4 areas. Great. This probably still doesn't help you. If you're either thinking of going into a class as a reviewer or asking someone to review your class, you're like, great, fantastic. That's still a lot of stuff. How does somebody possibly manage all of this? Okay, that's where the next piece comes in. Where to actually look for evidence of all of these things that I just talked about that you could be looking for to see about effective teaching practices. So we're going to go through several different areas. First area to look in, very lucrative place to see teaching practices and to answer some of those questions that we just went through are announcements. So the kind of things that you'd be looking for in an announcement is, are they frequent, right? Are they not just 2 announcements a semester? You're not really communicating with students. Are they brief, right? Nobody wants to read through or watch a 20-minute announcement, a video. Announcements should address course updates, changes, and reminders. Announcements should be responsive to students and questions and problems and needs. In other words, are you seeing the instructor in real time, as much as you can real time, reacting to what is going on in class and helping students with what they're asking for and what they need or what the challenges might be? Announcements should not be recycled. They need to be personalized and specific to this current class. So it doesn't help if you're like, okay, we're in week 3 of class. I'm going to put my week 3 announcement in there that I used the last 5 years. That's not an announcement. That's just, another content piece of a class. So they really need to be specific to whatever is going on with the current semester or the current class. And then also, in announcements, think about video and audio as well as written communication. I strive to do almost all of my announcements as a short video, just because it's one of the few ways that I have to have this kind of interaction with students where they can feel like they're talking to me, or at least I'm talking to them. Okay, the next place to look to answer all those questions that we just talked about is in the gradebook or the assignment Dropbox. Again, things that you'd be looking for in there are responses timely? Are things driven by a rubric, or are they aligned with stating assessment expectations? So, right, if there are these 5 criteria or assessment expectations, is the actual feedback speaking to what you said the students needed to do in those criteria? Looking for things like both quantitative and qualitative feedback, right? So quantitative, yeah, this is a 95 out of 100 points. And here is why it is a 95, right? Having the kind of written pieces as well. Looking for the feedback that is given being personalized and specific, and also offering ideas for improvement. Looking that the Dropbox and the assignment spaces are easy for students to use. And then again, that everything is up to date in there. Due dates, the expectations, the point values, all of that stuff. Ooh, discussions. We haven't talked much about discussions yet, but this is, I would say, if discussions are being used in an asynchronous online class, this is a gold mine. This is where I think you can get the absolute most information as a reviewer about the teaching practices and how an instructor is doing. So, things to look for. Is the instructor actively involved? Is the instructor actively involved in the discussion but not dominating? So, meaning the instructor shouldn't be answering or talking back to every single post that a student makes, because it becomes a lot of one-on-one conversations then, and it's not actually a discussion amongst the class. But the instructor needs to be in there as well. They can't just post a prompt and skedaddle. In the discussion, are the responses from the instructor doing things that are crucial to the conversation and to moving the conversation forward? Things like adding clarification, addressing questions, offering encouragement, those sorts of things. Is the instructor in the discussion and how they're interacting in the discussion respectful, welcoming? Are they creating an atmosphere where ideas can be explored? Are they managing problematic student responses? These are all really, really active engagement things that, again, if discussions are being used, that an instructor needs to be doing. They can't just turn this into Lord of the Flies in there, right? Post a prompt and let everybody fend for themselves. There needs to be management of a discussion, just as there would be if the discussion was happening in a face-to-face class, right? You're not going to have an instructor generally ask a question and then leave the room. They're going to be continuing forwarding the conversation. If something, a little sticky comes up, they're going to manage that conversation. Look for an instructor to be acting as a guide, not as an expert with the answer, right? If you're just going to come in and say, everybody, let's talk about this, but here's the right answer, there's no reason to have a discussion. And that's not really a good instructional practice. You need to look for there being clear rules on both behalf of the student and the instructor on how they're going to participate, kind of responses that are expected. So setting the ground rules of how best to engage in the conversation. I do a lot of training, quote unquote, with my students in the first few weeks of class so they understand this and so they can really engage in a productive conversation. Is there feedback being provided to improve discussions, right? So if students aren't quite getting this, is the instructor in there saying, okay, this is good, but we need a little bit more of, we need to be asking people a little bit more questions. We need to be providing more resources to support our ideas, whatever it may happen to be that is needed. And then of course, this is gonna, the drumbeat I keep bringing up here, everything needs to be current and updated. Okay, another place to look for all of this great stuff are if there's some sort of open topic or Q&A or water cooler, just kind of the non-topic related discussion areas available to students. And again, within those, things to look for good teaching practices are responses happening in a timely manner by the instructor. Is whatever that they're sharing, is it accurate? Is it current? Are they supporting students and whatever their needs may be? So just kind of look at the instructor interaction in those sort of off-topic discussion areas. Okay, syllabus. This isn't clearly, no matter what class is being reviewed or what modality the class is, you need to be looking at the syllabus. That's just kind of a given. But no matter what, let's talk through this anyway, even if this applies to any modality. So some things to look for in a syllabus in doing a review. Are policies and language inclusive of all students? Oh my gosh, are things current? Once again, materials and resources. Is it updated for the current class? That seems like, a pretty low bar to update something. I unfortunately have seen more than one syllabus from an instructor where they just recycled it from the previous semester, maybe changed the date at the top and that's it. Didn't really think about updating this for the current semester. Does the syllabus contain clear and complete policies, procedures, expectations? Does it have information in the syllabus about how the instructor wants to communicate when they're available? Does the syllabus have information on student support services? So again, those sorts of things that the instructor may not do, but are hopefully provided or available by other offices or places within an institution. The syllabus should explain kind of the classroom or set the norms for the class and set the classroom climate. And hopefully there's also a clear and complete course schedule. Okay. Another area to look at, formative student surveys and feedback. So this, not talking about kind of those end of course surveys that often are a part of class, right? The student fills out, after the class is completed and the instructor sees them, weeks later. I am talking about things that the instructor, feedback an instructor might be gathering throughout the semester to help develop and improve a class while it's actually happening. So if an instructor happens to do some or gathers data from students midstream, mid-course, the things that they should be doing is sharing a summary of responses with students, right? So they know that you read it, that you paid attention to it as an instructor. Anything that needs to be acted on should be acted on in a timely manner. Okay, all the students told me that I need to do more announcements. So I now am committing to putting 2 announcements per week in class, whatever it may be. And that anything that can't be addressed, students, you all told me that it would be nice for me to be, to give answers at the end of a discussion. I'm not going to do that because there isn't an answer. This is you are going to have to come up with the answers on your own. So something like that. What if there's something that students asked you to do and you can't do it, address why. Whew, okay, let me take a breath here. I'm almost out of breath from all of this. That is a lot of information I just threw at you. I 100% understand that. So how could you, if you were reviewing or asking somebody to review a course for you, how could you possibly do all of that? Let me just give you, again, if there's maybe one more slide you would take a photo of today, this might be it. Let's distill all of that stuff down to a manageable process. So it would be very, very reasonable for a reviewer to do the following in an hour, maybe 2 hours, which would be, about the same length that somebody would sit and observe an in-person class. They could do all of the following and have a good understanding of the teaching practices and how the instructor did. So first off, review the syllabus. That's just a given. That's going to happen no matter what kind of class you're reviewing. The reviewer should also look at any sort of intro to the class module, or the kind of the first thing that any student jumping into a class would see to get started. Have a reviewer look at that. Have a reviewer look at just a handful of the most recent announcements in class, right? They don't have to go through the entire semester's worth, but you get a pretty good idea of how an instructor is communicating and interacting by looking at a handful of recent announcements. If possible, have the reviewer look at one completed assignment in the Dropbox, and then also choose one module or one lesson in class. So if an instructor, if you again are asking somebody to review a class for you, have them look at those 5 areas, talk about some of those questions or have them address some of those questions we noted before. They're going to be able to do this. This is going to be manageable. If it is helpful for you to have something that's a little bit more specific, I actually have created a online teaching review template that incorporates all of this stuff that I've just been talking about over the last 40 minutes or so. So this template is broken up into those 4 areas, right? The engagement, instruction, assessments, and course administration. And for each of those 4 areas, I ask a question like, okay, so one of the questions that we talked about for engagement is, are replies to students timely? So you can give this template to a reviewer. They can ask that question. They can say, oh, here's where I would look to see if responses are timely. Are they, as the instructor, responding to the discussions? Are they, answering questions the students may have in a question and answer area? Okay, good. I looked at those areas for that evidence. Great, they're doing a great job. I'm going to mark exemplary, or they could be a little bit better. I'm going to mark developing. So the way this template is put together is, if you only want to really know about your engagement, you could give a reviewer 4 or 5 questions related to engagement. They could look at those questions, look at the evidence of where to find those, fill it out, and get it back to you. Pretty manageable thing. I've created this template both with and without ratings. That some don't have the exemplary, proficient, etc. Just because some folks prefer just to do kind of more of a qualitative and provide comments on how things are going. If, again, you are interested in this, feel free. You can scan these 2 QR codes and you can access these 2 templates. Again, put together all of this stuff that I've been talking about forever here. I will note that these are not formatted to be used on a phone. So you might be, scanning these QR codes on your phone. The formatting is going to be a little bit off. But if you scan them and it's something you like, right, of course, just email it to yourself or send it to yourself, and they are going to be very easy to use and formatted to use on a desktop or on your laptop. So just wanted to give that warning there, that they're going to not look great to be used on a phone. So I will wait a moment there, just in case folks want to grab those 2 templates. And hopefully, if you look at those, that you see all the stuff I just talked about, you'll see how it all kind of comes together in a very you can do a course review in a very manageable way with all that information by using these templates. Okay, I know I threw a lot of stuff at you. So here's what I'm going to kind of end with. Does this still seem overwhelming? Does it still seem like, oh my gosh, this is too much? Okay, I can distill everything down about what needs to be done to review an asynchronous online class into 3 things. You need to see that you or the person you're reviewing is organized. That is of utmost critical importance in an asynchronous online class. If students don't know where to find things, it's all kind of a wonky mess, they're going to struggle in there. So make sure the class is organized. Number 2, the instructor has to be present. They cannot put a class up and then disappear for the rest of the semester. You need to see them in the class doing things, active, engaged. And then finally, that the instructor needs to be timely. That's probably the make or break, the number 1 make or break thing I see in an asynchronous online class is the instructor in there asking, helping students with their questions, addressing concerns, whatever it may happen to be. Okay, so with that, we have a couple of minutes left here. I don't know if anybody has anything that they would like to mention or bring up, or I'm happy just to step back and have a conversation as needed in our last couple minutes. And I know, Bob, that I had given you some potential questions. I don't remember what those were.
Yeah, just
I'm just looking at our chat here. All right, well, not hearing anything at this point. Bob, is there anything else that we should be doing to wrap up our time here together?
well, there is one question you had that I think ties into several of the other sessions we had. That's what is the one task in your daily work as a faculty member that you wish to be automated or made more efficient?
And I'm sorry, Bob, I kind of missed the end of that question there. Your audio got a little quiet.
Sorry, I've been dealing with laryngitis for several
Oh,
weeks. Uh,
oh my goodness.
yeah, the one task that could be automated or made more efficient.
Whew. In an asynchronous online class. Just stick with me. I'm going to give my response. I would love if anybody else had anything here. So this doesn't have anything to necessarily do with what I just talked about with course reviews. But this, I mentioned at the beginning, I am using this a new alternative grading system. So real briefly, what this is I am putting every assessment into one of four buckets. So the first bucket is exemplary. Like these are assignments where everything is just 100% perfect. I could share it as an exemplar. The next bucket is meets expectations. So yeah, you got it. You met the learning outcome. The next bucket is revisions suggested. So not quite there. There's stuff that could be done better. And then the last bucket is non-accessible. It's just, I can't do anything with this yet. So this is actually, I don't say it would automate things, but it's saving me quite a bit of time because I don't have to sit and parse out what's the difference between a 92 and a 94% or whatever it may be. I can just real quickly look at stuff, somewhat quickly look at stuff and drop it into one of those four buckets for students. I don't know. Again, that's a completely different topic and a completely different presentation. Maybe that'll be for next year, but it really has, yeah, I think it's been really helpful for students and it saved me time as well. Let's see here. And oh, I'm sorry. And I may have been, I just looked at the post here. Any thoughts on automating summary of discussion posts? And that may have been what you were asking, Bob, and I completely went in a different way, Stephanie. I apologize. This isn't an automating of discussion posts, but it is something I have students do, is I'll have students maybe who for some reason weren't able to engage in a discussion, whatever, they had a busy week, whatever it may happen to be, they can still get kind of their participation points for the discussion if they become the person who is summarizing it. The class loves it. The class absolutely loves when somebody summarizes things. And it also allows that student, they're still just as engaged. They had to read through the entire discussion and they're still putting their voice forward. So not necessarily an automation, but yeah, something I've done. So. Well, I want to be aware of the time here. I believe that we're at our 50 minutes, so folks can take a break and then move on to another session if they want. So again, thanks for folks who stuck with me here. I hope this was interesting and helpful. Feel free, if anybody wants to chat a little bit more, you're welcome to. My email's on the bottom of those templates if you happen to use those.
And thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Really good information. Helped us.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Yeah. And yeah, so happy Valentine's Day. Believe it or not, it's also National Ferris Wheel Day.
I
don't
don't know if
how
I'll be
you
able to find a
celebrate
Ferris wheel today.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great rest of the day.
You as well.